Newt knows what Newt Gingrich just told Trump about the leakers will drop his jaw. Whether or not the leakers are fake or real, the Trump administration has been attacked on a number of stories that hide behind unnamed sources, quote. That is not the real story. These leaks are hurting our country. Watch what Newt Gingrich does below. Like Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly said, these leakers are darn close to treason. NBC News, Homeland Security John Kelly, intelligence leaks are darn close to treason. These leaks are now hurting our relationship with our other countries. Did you see this? British Prime Minister Theresa May was angry about the leaks from the American intelligence community right after the bombing in Manchester that killed 22 innocent people. These leaks are drastically hurting our relationship with other countries. Donald Trump. It is my opinion that many of the leaks coming out of the White House are fabricated lies made up by the fake news media. Whenever you see the words sources say in the fake news media and they don't mention names, whenever you see the words, right, it is very possible that those sources don't exist but are made up by fake news writers. Fake news is the enemy. Newt Gingrich thinks that we should throw the leakers in jail. Doesn't that sound like a good idea? Trump should use the full weight of the law to go after these leakers. They are now hurting our intelligence gathering. How is this not treason?
Let me say, first of all, that my book's not called Predicting Trump. I think that's impossible. But I think what people have to understand is that we have two competing alternative realities. And one of the great tests of the Trump team is going to be, can they stick in their world and ignore all the people on the other side? They just had a remarkably successful trip. Everywhere they went, I think they were achieving their goals, sometimes with a little bit of pressure. They were pushing NATO, for example, to spend more money and meet its fair share. They were not patsies for anybody. They had an extraordinary historic moment in Riyadh, comparable to anything any American president has done. So they were doing well. How are they doing it? They were disciplined. They were strategic. They stayed on message. They didn't play games with the elite media. Meanwhile, back here at home, if you watch some of these networks, it's almost like, oh, Trump's off on a trip, but now let me tell you about the stuff we really love. Yes. I hope they will come home, focus on jobs, health, infrastructure, tax cuts, and basically shove to one side all of this garbage. Take the case of what the current argument about Jared Kushner. Right. You were a brand new administration. You believe you were being eavesdropped on by Obama, which we now know is true. You believe that you want to find a way to break out of the current relationship with Russia. Is there anything illegitimate about a new administration after the election sitting down and talking with any country in the world? The answer is no.
Of course not.
But if you're the Washington Post and the New York Times and you have the right, quote, unnamed sources.
Right.
That's exactly
right. No, you're exactly right. I mean, we were talking earlier, there's really no difference today between reading the Inquirer and reading something like the Washington Post, because no longer do you have the days where you actually need to name two sources, let alone one. So President Trump is tweeting about this as well. He says, whenever you see the words sources say in the fake news media and they don't mention names, it is very possible that those sources don't exist but are made up by fake news writers. Hashtag fake news is the enemy. He's going right after them. But to this point, Speaker, I mean, this is really difficult for the American people to figure out, because how many stories are leaked, these bombshells, based off of a letter or just an unnamed source? No one knows where it comes from.
But let's draw a distinction. I wrote my newsletter this week on the very real notion that we should lock up people who leak secrets. I want to draw a distinction. There's political garbage. There are people who go across to the Starbucks near the White House, and they sit and they tell insider stories. That's unfortunate, and you ought to fire them if you can find them. But that's not the same as violating the Secrecy Acts. People who violate the Secrecy Acts ought to go to jail. What happened with the Manchester information, for example, after the bombing in Manchester, undermined the British investigation, weakened our relationship to our allies, and is dangerous. Whoever leaked that should go to jail. Now, you start putting a few people in jail, you'll see the leaks dry up dramatically.
Yeah, sure.
But let me say one other thing, because I think this is one of the great challenges of the Trump administration and will help decide their fate in history. If the president would simply read what he writes, he would cancel the daily briefings. Why would you look at everything he writes about the fake media, about there are enemies, they're dishonest, they're totally dishonest, they're unbelievably dishonest. I mean, read the stuff he says. And then ask yourself, if that's all true, why would you play a game that legitimizes them by letting them in the White House for a daily briefing, which is all attack media? They don't care about information. Their job is to humiliate Spicer, find a way to catch him off guard, play gotcha games. And I've said strongly, I'm going to keep saying it, they ought to cancel the daily briefing because it is nothing except a vehicle for the attack media.
It's like briefing the Hillary Clinton campaign staff, but it's got to be frustrating. I mean, it's hard to imagine a better first foreign trip for a president, yet the whole time the so-called mainstream media and fake news are calling out other issues that are not even a scandal. And then you've got even more so this idea that there's a shakeup coming. There's always a looming shakeup. And so and the Washington Post and New York Times have two headlines today about what's going to happen when they come home, who's in, who's out. So we did a little research on some headlines that have been out in the mainstream media since January. Of all the people that the knives are out for, right, that are soon to be gone, it just turns out none of them are gone yet. So there's knives were out for Reince Priebus in March. The downfall of Kellyanne Conway was coming in February. Bannon's job was in danger in April. And it goes on and on with, H.R. McMaster, the knives are out for him in May. Sean Spicer
has been out since the beginning.
He's been out for forever. Sebastian Gorka, the knives are out for Gary Cohn in March, and now even President Trump will resign soon, according to this media. I mean, the way the palace intrigue, it's not reporting, it's just gossip to try to take this White House down.
But you got to erase everything you learned as a child about the news media. All right?
Yep.
Look, lions eat zebras. Okay, this may seem like an odd parallel, but think about it. If I said to you, oh, there's a lion eating a zebra, you wouldn't go, oh my gosh, I thought they'd become friends. How could that lion be eating his friend? You go, yeah, they're a lion. They eat zebras, okay? The left-wing media hates Donald Trump. The left-wing media wants to destroy Donald Trump. This is why they should cancel the daily briefings. The left-wing media sits up all evening drinking and talking to each other thinking, what can we do? When they wake up in the morning, their opening line to themselves is, I know Donald Trump did something horrible. I wonder what it is. Now, the White House has to get over this, and frankly, all of us who are their friends have to get over this. The New York Times is their mortal enemy. The Washington Post, their mortal enemy. CNN was 93-7 negative, according to Harvard. 93-7. Why would you let anybody from CNN have anything to do with the Trump administration when they are 93-7 negative?
Well, how do you get that balance right, though, Speaker? Because as you know, there's a real important role for media. I mean, we are in media as well. We try to do the best job that we can. But you don't want to live in a place like North Korea. So where do you find that balance of not having press briefings, but also letting the media do their job?
Well, first of all, the president has 1,000 ways to communicate with the American people. He can give formal speeches. He can tweet. He can do Facebook Live. He could have Skype events with people around the country. And all of his cabinet officers can also communicate. And I have no problem if they want to do off-camera briefings. But my point to you would be, the media has an obligation to cover what it covers. It doesn't have an obligation. There's no requirement in the American system for people to have the kind of dog and pony show on television we have. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, at his very first press briefing in 1933, says to the reporters, you cannot quote me directly. You can quote an unnamed White House source. He never gives an on-the-record briefing in 12 years, and he says, if you violate this, you'll be kicked out and you won't be back in the briefings.
Well, there's been relationships, obviously, with the press closer. JFK, of course, relationship during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, could have created even more chaos had the press not listened to what the president had to say. I think that's gone. That civility is long gone.
Consider, just for a second, Melania, who was a terrific First Lady of the United States, who looked fabulous everywhere, if she were a liberal Democrat, she'd be on the cover of every woman's magazine in America, right? Okay. So let's start with that as an example. If Donald Trump were JFK, he could do. You could afford to do this. If Sean Spicer was Pierre Salinger, you could afford to do this. The news media loved John F. Kennedy. They covered up for him. They protected him. They didn't report his various weaknesses. The fact was the news media was going to turn him into Camelot any way they could, and so he was playing the game he could play. What I'm suggesting to you is this president's greatest strength is reaching the American people. His greatest power of re-election will be achievements, creating real jobs, creating real tax cuts, getting health care fixed. And the danger they have is that they get up every morning and they get sucked into this dance that is entirely destructive, in which the elite media pays attention to them. And my guess is they spend more time trying to prepare Spicer for the daily fight with the media than they spend trying to communicate the major issues in the country.
Exactly right.
So true, so true. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching.